Brown 45. Brown 45. Hot, 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 hot.
You are listening to Any Given Sunday, Australia.
Yes, joining us now. Oh, geez, that was a terrible start. Yes, hello, welcome to the Any Given Sunday Australia podcast. Oh no, I'm reading it off the form and it's absolutely stuffed me. Number one, Timmy, in at least three households. One, Gridiron Australia. What else? A studio. This is a great start, mate. How are you at TC24 at Tim Cardi AGSAU? That is one of the better starts that we've had for a while.
That was pretty crisp. Are you having a little stroke or something? Are you okay?
Yeah. Just hang on. I have a glass of water.
We're good. Left side of your body feeling, you all right?
Yeah, numb. Numb. It's actually the right side of the body with the ankle. But yeah, you're all good, mate. You're living the dream. You look like you're on your own little bit of Daniel leave with that beautiful beard you've got going on.
Yes, just on a little bit of leave at the moment. So just enjoying that, bit of family time. It's good.
Beautiful, you and those girls. It's good to see. But we do have someone. Danny is off tonight. We've given him a day off. But we do have a pretty big Australian joining us. He is an Aussie that's making waves in the NFL in a slightly different fashion to what people may think. He's showing everyone that you don't have to play the game to make a massive impact. He's the scouting assistant down in Atlanta for the Atlanta Falcons, Mr. James McClintock. How are you, mate?
What's going on, guys? I'm good. Appreciate you having me on.
No, we appreciate you, especially me, getting back and forth with you the last few weeks has been fun. So I do appreciate you giving up your time and coming on.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, like you said, it's been a long time coming. We got in touch, I think, before the draft. So obviously, right in the thick of things. So I'm glad we could finally figure something out and I could get on.
Yeah, you're probably not too busy in the lead up to the draft. So yeah, you're probably happy to have TMac in your DMs just harassing you.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, I had plenty of time during that. I just I was really doing more R&R during that time. So
yeah, the best thing, the real story of how we actually got together was your old man actually sent us. He DM'd us and he told us all about you and said if we are thinking of something a little bit different, that you'd be good to talk to.
Yeah, he did tell me that. I think he's just a proud dad. So sometimes it's a little embarrassing, but yeah, no, he's loved every step of my journey so far and been very supportive of it. So no, he's a big part of it.
Nah, huge dad moment. I love it. Something that I always start with that Timmy and Danny, our normal co-hosts, give me a bit of shit about, but I love to get started just off the right foot. Just to get inside your brain a little bit, just three people that you'd have, dead or alive, doesn't really matter, just someone that you'd have at a dinner party, mate.
Yeah, so I kind of two-pronged answer with this, I think. For me right now, personally, my family, so I got a sister and I got a mum and a dad, and the three of us haven't been in the same room, or the four of us rather, haven't been in the same room for about 7 years. So right now, that'd be my answer, is to get all of us in the same room. Hopefully it's not too far away.
Love it.
Yeah, but
right in the fields. That one.
Yeah, but on a I guess a professional level, which is probably more suited for the podcast, would be I don't know. I think you think of big people in football, and a lot of people think of the athletes like Tom Brady and stuff. For me, it's more on like the personnel coaching side. So as a scout for Dallas Cowboys, who I grew up supporting the Cowboys, believe it or not, just because my dad's a big Cowboys fan, and they were the only team that was really shown on TV. So I grew up supporting them, and they had a scout called Gil Brandt, who was pivotal in terms of the entire scouting process from the beginning. I think he was their senior personnel executive for about 25 years at the Cowboys, and from like the 60s through to the 80s. So he's someone that I've looked up to in terms of that whole process. So he'd be someone I'd want to sit down and have dinner with, just to, everything that I learn now is basically come from his playbook. So to sort of learn where he started from and how he came up with the things he came up with would be pretty cool. But then I think if you get outside of football, probably someone like Obama or Denzel or guys like that, just because of their life experiences, and they all have some pretty cool stories. So it's nothing too sexy, but just probably those three you'd love to sit down and have a chat with, and if I can add a fourth, maybe Steve Smith, just because I've been
nice.
because I'm over here for the cricket, so he's kind of on my mind a little bit, and he's a weird character, but he's awesome in his own way. So I'm sure he'd keep it lively at dinner. So
Nice. Just so people aren't confused, the cricket isn't at Atlanta. You're over in London to watch the Ashes. Are you in your room this week just getting the shadow batting out of the way, or before you meet Steve?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I'm actually going to take a photo of myself doing that and get him a sign, and then probably just hang that up in my wall at home. Yeah.
I love it.
Brilliant. I love that you're hanging the photo of yourself doing that. We won't get the photo of him signed. We'll get you doing it. Yeah, just get him to sign it. But
if he listens to this, feel free to get a photo of himself and then send it over my way. So
we'll tag him. He does normally listen every week. So
he does, He might be slightly busy the next couple of weeks, but I'm sure in the downtime, maybe during tea or something.
He needs time to unwind. So
especially if it's raining again. Hopefully not in London, but if it is raining, maybe just chuck the podcast in and he'll have a listen. You said that not that sexy, but I reckon a few people, male and female, would say that Denzel Washington is in that class.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Maybe I'll leave him out of that. But as far as Obama and Gil Brandt's about 90, I think. So
he had his moments.
Exactly.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure back in the day he did.
Yeah. You've kind of answered my first question, but we'll phrase it in a different way. Obviously, we'll get into your studies, but before getting over to Atlanta and getting into this kind of role, did you follow the NFL growing up? Obviously, you said you're a Cowboys fan. You followed it from your old man. How did you get into it? And was it something you actually did actively follow while you were back in Australia?
Yeah, so as I said, my dad was a massive Cowboys fan in the 90s when they won all those Super Bowls. And as I said, they were the only team that really was shown on TV at the time. So that's how he became a fan. And he just kind of got enamored with the Cowboys being America's team and that kind of whole charade. So he loved football. Growing up, I kind of just watched it on TV with him. Usually it'd just be the primetime games because I wasn't getting up at 3 a.m. to watch football that I didn't know anything about. So I just kind of, just as a normal fan, just watched it. And then I think it was probably around, I want to say maybe 13, 14. I was watching the NFL draft for the first time pretty seriously. And I remember just watching and seeing guys like, I think that year was maybe Tyron Smith the Cowboys took, which is their left tackle now. And I remember seeing that guy, how he moved, how big he was, just the incredible athlete that he was at that size. And then in that same draft, there were a bunch of receivers that were taken that were kind of smaller slot guys that were, 5'7", 5'8". And I thought to myself, what a bizarre sport that those two types of body types can be on the field at the same time and be just as impactful in a game. And so that was kind of when my mind sort of shifted from a fan more towards the scouting side of things, just thinking like the different traits that every position has. And that was really cool to me. And then obviously as you get more into it, the team building element of it all, how you've got the draft, you have free agency, you have all sorts of leagues now. That kind of compounded it even more. And so when I got to university, I think that's probably your next question, but yeah, I got to university and they had a football team there at the University of Sydney. That's kind of when I sort of took it and ran with it from there. So.
Yeah, you've led us into that beautifully. So yeah, you went on to study at Sydney Uni. What were you studying there?
So I started out studying an economics degree, and then I ended up graduating with a Bachelor's of Commerce. So
beautiful, nice pivot. Your time at Sydney Uni, you got involved with the Lions. Can you tell us a bit about the club and what your roles there? Were you sitting coaching, that sort of thing? Just give us a bit of a rundown of your involvement there with the Lions.
Yeah, so my first year at university, I didn't do anything with it. I was very interested in it, but I didn't know how to get involved. It's something that I think a lot of people look at as, it's over in America, it's unattainable, and that's kind of how I was, to be completely honest. but I to the end of my first year at university, got in touch with the head coach there and reached out to him and basically just said, I don't know what I'm going to do, don't know how I'm going to get involved, but I'd love to just kind of be around the team, learn as much as I can. I don't know if I can offer you anything, but I know that you can offer me something. So let's do it. And he was awesome. I mean, he brought me in. I didn't have any responsibilities, but I was allowed to sit in on meetings. I was allowed to come to practice. I went to a couple of games and kind of just got involved from there. It was really difficult with my studies and having to learn because I was really starting from scratch. And at the time, I thought maybe coaching was the route that I would go in football. But just being around the team in a weird way was actually good for me in the sense that I don't think my personality is very suited to coaching. And I look at the coaches now that I'm around and I'm like, yeah, that was a good call. That was a really good call because it's just it's a different type of person to be a coach. And, I'm a lot more I'd rather sit in the dark room and watch tape than be in front of a bunch of people explaining football to them. That's just, it's a different personality. So, so I did that for the rest of my time there. I was kind of in and out, it was difficult just with school. But throughout that time, I realized that I wanted to get into scouting and personnel. And so I remember at one point in my second year, I literally typed in on Google and just said, how do you become an NFL scout? And it came up with a bunch of different ways and all of it seemed, absurd for someone in Australia to go do those different things. But one thing that came up was a school, I guess, called the Scouting Academy, which is put on by a guy called Dan Hatman, who's a former scout. And at the time, this is 6 years ago, it wasn't that big. Now it's grown to become quite a big platform for people trying to get into scouting. And he put together a program. I think it was 16 weeks where from A to Z, it was basically telling you how to scout and it went from how to write reports to what you should be looking at to, even some of the classes were when he was on the road as an area scout in college scouting, what was he bringing? What was he eating? How was he scheduling his travel, all that kind of stuff. So, and that was awesome for me because I actually, to this day, some of the stuff that he taught me in that class about how to write reports is stuff that I'll still use now in my reports. And so that was probably a pivotal 16 weeks for me just to learn about it all. So I got into that. And then I kind of just through talking with him, more research, I realized that, getting over to America was possible. The best way to go about that would be to get into kind of recruiting. And that was a whole kind of, process of learning about that for me. So.
Yeah, right. Looking at all of your different pathways and just all the things that you've studied. I don't know if it was all part of the one course, but there was. I was scrolling down the screen for a good minute, seeing all the things that you've studied. But it was quite incredible. That kind of led to going from Sydney Uni and that course that you've just taken to Chapel Hill. So you finally made it over to America. You've got into North Carolina. How did that analytic role at University of North Carolina come about?
So what I actually did was in my last year of school back in Sydney, I put together a sort of a packet with a bunch of scouting reports, resume, things like that, and I put it into like a PDF, and I sent it off to every single school in America that had a football program. So I ended up sending I didn't all do this in one day, but I ended up being about 500 or 600 emails. It took me a couple of weeks to do that. So, but I sent that out and basically said, look, looking to get into recruiting over there. If you got any opportunities, I'm happy to volunteer, that kind of thing. And of that, 500-600 emails, I got maybe, I want to say 50 responses. Of the 50, about 40 of them were just automated. Appreciate you reaching out. You could tell it wasn't someone actually responding. And then of the 10 that was actual people that responded, It was 8 of them said, we don't have anything, sorry. And then the 2 that did were Samford University, which is in Birmingham, Alabama, and then the director of player personnel at UNC Chapel Hill, John Mark Hamilton, and he responded as well. So when I graduated, and both of them basically said, hey, if you can get over here and meet with us for an interview, by all means, like, we're happy to sit down and chat with you. So when I graduated, I've been working throughout college. I was a groundskeeper at a golf course. So it was tough, early mornings. We were there like 3 a.m. So, but no, it was, so I'd saved up from that and basically went on a trip to America. My dad was with me for a little bit of it, but he went home afterwards. And then I kind of continued on, and I went to Birmingham, Alabama. There was no buses, so I got like a 6-hour Uber from the middle of nowhere, Mississippi. Funnily enough, the Uber driver was an Englishman, and we talked about cricket and the Ashes. So yeah, full circle. But yeah, so I went and did the interview with them. It was good, and they said you're welcome to come on board. But the visa process, they'd never done it before. They didn't have anything kind of set in place to deal with that, and so it sort of just fell through. And then the UNC interview, it never really transpired, and so I was about a day away from heading back to Australia, and I was actually at the Senior Bowl, which is one of the all-star scouting events that we have in college for guys looking to get to the NFL. And I was just there trying to network, and I got an email from John Mark, and he said, happy to interview with you over the next like week or so. And I said, I'm actually going home. So came back to Australia, and pretty unsuccessful trip all in all, to be honest. But I sat down with him. I think it was like 3 a.m. and did an interview with him. And he said, if you can get yourself over here and you can get the visa, then you're more than welcome to join us and volunteer. And nothing was promised or anything like that. But I came over, started working as a volunteer with them. So I was there for about a year. And that was in 2018, I think I was. Coach Fedora was the head coach at the school at the time. And so that was his last year coaching there. And so I was a volunteer for that whole year. And then when he got fired, Coach Brown, Mac Brown, who obviously, I grew up knowing all about him and watching Friday Night Lights TV show. He had a couple appearances on that show too. So it was pretty cool to kind of be around him. But he hired me full-time in a paid position as a recruiting analyst. And I worked on the defensive side of the ball. And basically the job kind of entailed, helping the coaches with anything they needed. So the recruiting calendar basically dictates what you do throughout a year. So it has little events and moments throughout the year that kind of tell you, all right, this is when we have official visits. This is when we have unofficial visits. This is when the coaches go out on the road to recruit. So they go into the schools and so I kind of helped them build out their schedule. We'd watch tape. We were kind of like the first line of defense as far as tape. So if the kid wasn't good enough to get through us, then we weren't going to show them to the coaches to watch. And so we sort of just helped them out with all of that because they obviously had a lot on their plate. And so, so I did that for another 6 months. So all in all, I was at UNC for about 18 months. And it was awesome. I learned, as you can imagine, just an incredible amount.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a couple of questions that have come from that. One, do you play golf after working on a course?
I do play golf. I do. Yeah, I do not get out there nearly as much as I'd like to. Basically, from the time training camp finishes or starts rather to about now, I can't play much at all because we got work. So I got about a 6-week period every year to get it in. Because doesn't Atlanta have some of the best courses in the world? Yeah, we got some nice ones. We definitely do. It's expensive though. It's very expensive. So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And I've forgotten the second question, so I'll move on. Anyway. I do remember. You were. It goes back to Sydney. You said you went in and you just wanted to coach. Did you ever think of actually playing, or was it more, I'm an analytics brain, I just want to coach?
It was a little bit of that. Honestly, what a lot of it was that when I was growing up, I played rugby. I played a lot of different sports, but I did play rugby for a couple of years. And I got 3 concussions in 1 year, 2 of which were pretty serious. And so after that year, I just thought to myself, I don't love rugby enough to keep playing this sport. So I sort of quit rugby, and from that point on, I played soccer, I played cricket moving forward. But it just never, given the concussions that I'd had, I just never kind of wanted to get involved in a contact sport from a physically, like from a playing standpoint, just because it wasn't worth it to me at that point. So that's kind of why I didn't get involved as a player.
Well, you heard from my speech at the start what too many knocks to the head will do to you, so it's probably a smart move by you. You said you're at North Carolina for 18 months, so you didn't go over there and study at all?
No. So when I went over to UNC, I'd graduated obviously from the University of Sydney, so I had my bachelor's. But I went over there, and the plan was to just work. And obviously that changed as we kind of went on. So I went over there, and I was working with the UNC football team, and then I kind of busted tables at a brewery that was down the street from the facility for about 6 months too. So,
and then you moved up to Liberty, which is in Virginia. Is that, again, did you study, or was it more of a work up there?
Yeah, so that's where things kind of became a little bit different. So at the end of that 18 months at UNC, my visa expired, and so I had to transition onto another visa. There was some complications with that whole process. As you can imagine, they're just the way it is, and what they need in terms of documents and all of it. It's very complicated. And so I actually, for that 2019 football season, I was with the team right up until training camp, but for that full season, I was actually back in Australia because my visa had expired, and I wasn't able to get a new visa to come over to America. So essentially, I kind of lost my job because they had to fill the position. So I was back in Australia, not really knowing what to do. Looked at kind of some other ways to get in with visas, and one of those ways was through a student visa. And so I decided to come over to America again now, basically starting from scratch again, and came over as a graduate assistant. Well, initially I just came over as a regular student and turned up on the doorstep at Liberty. My girlfriend was working at Liberty at the time. So my current girlfriend I met when I was at UNC. So we've been together for a while now. But she was working at Liberty, and so she had some contacts with the football team. So I came over as just a regular student and turned up on their doorstep and basically said, "Hey, can I work?" They were like, "Yeah, that's cool." So they let me in. And then after about 2 months, they brought me on as a graduate assistant. So essentially what that means is they pay for your school, and they pay you like $1,000 a month as like a stipend, kind of a wage type deal. And so I which was great because the school was expensive. So I didn't. My plan was very short term. I was like, I didn't know how I was going to pass the first semester. I didn't know how I was going to pay for school. So it did work out in the end. So I worked there for again probably another 18 months. And then at that point, that's when I kind of got the call to go to Auburn. So, that's how I got to Liberty. And when I was at Liberty, I was studying. I did my master's degree there, and so I finished that out at Liberty. So,
hell yeah! How did you go with the workload? Because obviously, it's quite demanding, just the coaching workload in itself. And then put on top of that, studying, doing your masters. How'd you go juggling your time?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot. It was kind of, we work all day and all weekend. Recruiting in college is kind of a 24/7, 365 type deal right now. So that's kind of what it was for us. But when I come home from work is kind of when I get my work done. Most of the GAs that we had, most GAs across the country, they'll just do online classes for the most part. Because I was Australian, I actually, in order to have the visa, needed to actually do some residential classes, so I had to go to in-person classes.
Of course, yeah.
So that threw a nice little spanner in the works even more. But no, I mean it was fine. I knew it was kind of a short-term pain, and it's not as if I was doing it for nothing. I was going to get a master's degree at the end of it. So, so no, it was fine.
Yeah. Awesome. And then your time at Auburn, you were the director of player personnel. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of your time there?
So it was assistant director of player personnel. So I worked with
Let's go with director.
Yeah, director does sound nice, but my boss would be annoyed at that because he was actually the one that he brought me over. So I worked with him at UNC, and so he was there with me at UNC, and then we kind of stayed in touch a little bit.
So did he kind of recruit you to Auburn?
Yeah, pretty much. So I was at Liberty, and when he got the job as the director of player personnel, he gave me a ring and basically said, "Hey, I know you've been over at Liberty, but if you want to come, this is kind of the offer, and we want to have you." And at the time, Brian Hasen had just been hired, and so it was kind of an exciting opportunity, and obviously the SEC, that's a big deal, and
huge.
For me, my goal had been the NFL, and I felt like the SEC was going to get me closer to that. And so I took that job there. Ironically enough, when I was at Liberty, the head coach was Hugh Freeze, and when I left Auburn, Hugh Freeze then became the head coach at Auburn. So I like to think that he's just following me. Maybe he'll be the Falcons next. So, but no. So I came over and I worked at Auburn. And so I was at Auburn until obviously I jumped to the NFL. So
yes,
that is the next step. I do want to, before we get to that, a majority of your time working there has been during the COVID years as well. How has that been? Was it different to what it has been over here in Australia? Obviously, without being here while it's happened, but being able to do scouting, are you literally just sitting in a dark room because you can't really go out and visit the people during that time?
Yeah, so when you work in college, so for a college team, unless you're a coach, you actually can't go out on the road at all. So the rules are in place to basically it makes sure that big time schools like your Alabamas and Georgias can't just hire 50 scouts to go out and recruit players when a smaller school might not be able to afford that luxury. So only the 10 or 11 coaches, which includes the head coach, can go out, and the head coach can only go out at certain points. So for them, it affected their schedule. They were basically stuck in the office. They couldn't do anything. All they had to do was basically Zooms, FaceTime calls, text messages, social media, like that. That was kind of their whole game. For us, it really didn't change a whole lot. We still we watched the tape that we watched. We made their schedules out as if they were going on the road, but then instead of like visiting a school, we just throw in like Zoom or FaceTime. And so we still, the premise of what we were doing was still pretty similar. The only thing that changed was the on-campus element of it all. So players coming on campus to visit us, that changed because obviously they weren't allowed to. And then once it started to open up a little bit more, there was still a lot of restrictions on what they could and couldn't do. And obviously mask wearing. And so, it definitely affected us for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. And then you finally got that chance to live the goal and make it to the NFL. So how did the opportunity with the Atlanta Falcons come about?
Yeah, so when I was at Auburn, they have a job they have a job in college, which is the NFL Pro Liaison. Essentially, every college team has one of those people that works for them. Now they may have like their main role may be something else, but one of their jobs is to be the pro liaison. And essentially, what that is when NFL scouts come through the doors and they're trying to find out information, they're trying to talk to coaches and basically collect as much they can for the NFL draft about the players at that school. Their point man, the person they go through, is the pro liaison. And so we had a pro liaison called Brent Bedsole, who he'd lived in Alabama. I think he's lived in Alabama his whole life. He knew the players. He had a great connection with the staff, and so he was the guy. And I basically explained to him what I wanted to do and where I was trying to go, and he couldn't have been any more supportive of it. So what he did was he brought me in and said, you can be as involved as you want to be. You can sit in on the meetings, you can meet the scouts, you can do kind of whatever you want. And so that was fantastic. And so for the first few months, I kind of just sat back of the room quietly, listened, took notes, things like that. And then as kind of our relationship grew and he sort of trusted me a little bit more, he allowed me to start actually saying things in the meetings and contributing to what the scouts' notes were and things like that. And so from that, I was able to kind of build a lot of relationships with scouts and decision makers that were coming through our doors. And so I met a bunch of people, and I'd just try and stay in contact with them. I'd give them the business card that I had, and most of them would do the same. And so I just kind of back and forth, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, I'd just be sending texts, and before big games, I'd be saying good luck. And so I kind of just stayed in touch with them. And so after my first year at Auburn, the hiring cycle is usually around straight after the draft to about now. That probably 7-8 week period is where everything happens. So from a scouting standpoint, coaches, their stuff happens right after the season, but for us, it's after the draft. And so I knew that was going to be kind of my chance to get in. So that year I went to the Senior Bowl again, because it was very close, about 2-hour drive from Auburn. And so I drove down there to Mobile, Alabama, and tried to network. I met up with a bunch of guys that I knew who had come through Auburn that year. Just again, still trying to just build connections, build relationships, and to be honest with you guys, I hated that stuff. I like building relationships, but when it's organic, not when you've clearly got something that you want.
Yeah.
They're the ones that can give it to you. It's very obvious what you're doing. So, so I did that, and then after the draft, I got a few phone calls from some people about kind of interviewing with different teams, and Atlanta was one of them. And so I interviewed with them on a Zoom at first, and then they brought me into the facility, and I did an in-person interview. So met with our senior VP, met with our GM, bunch of different scouts that were in the building. Went and watched a workout, had lunch with some people. It was a pretty cool experience, all in all. And then found out 2 days later that they wanted to bring me on. So,
how was that feeling? Sorry, Carts. I know when talking with Cardi, we obviously worked together, and when I told him that I wanted him on board with the podcast, he actually told me he cried, and it was a beautiful moment. So, how was your moment when you actually?
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was great. He's actually he's a teary man. It's beautiful. When I don't know if they called you or do you get an email or something when they say, mate, we want you on board at Atlanta to live out. They didn't say obviously live out your dream, but how's that moment when you actually finally get that news?
Yeah, it was really cool. I'm not an incredibly emotional guy, so I didn't cry or anything, but definitely,
it's okay.
Yeah, very different to Cardi. So, no, but I was, funnily enough, my mom had actually come out to visit. So the day that I interviewed in person was a Thursday, and my mom arrived in Atlanta because that was the main airport to Auburn. She arrived in Atlanta on that Thursday as well. And so after my interview, I swung through and picked her up, and we headed back to Auburn, which again is about a 2.5 hour drive. And so we got back, and we were just hanging out, and I hadn't seen her at the time in like 2 years, so we were just catching up and
talking cricket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
getting me going.
No, but it was.
Genuinely, that is so nice. Like, that is so good.
Yeah, no, and it was pretty cool. And then on the Saturdays, on the Saturday, we were actually driving back from getting lunch, I think it was, and I was driving her back to her hotel room, and our Carl Smith, he's essentially our assistant GM. He's our number 2. He gave me a call and just said he told me the news, and I had it on speakerphone in the car with my mom actually. So it was, considering Yeah,
Yeah, fist pumping.
no, she really was. She started crying because obviously it had been like four years
Yeah.
of some pretty great ups and some pretty low downs. So she was very excited. She started crying, and so it was a pretty cool moment. And I don't know to this day that Kyle even knows she was on the call while he was speaking to me. So, but yeah, no, it was cool.
That is very cool. And to your point, man, about how you were saying how you found it hard having to go and meet and network and all that stuff. And obviously you've had to hustle and grind. And I just want to say mad respect to you because you created your own opportunities. Like it wasn't given to you. So full credit to you for going out there and getting it done, mate. It's awesome. And it's really good to hear your story. So
I appreciate that. No, thank you.
Massive props to you. So day to day, give us a look at, or give us an insight into what sort of day to day life is for you down at the Falcons building. Like what's your day to day looking like?
Yeah, so I was a scouting assistant. I actually last week just got a promotion to get on the road as a college scout. So
I didn't see that anywhere. I didn't see that.
It's unofficial yet. So
you heard it here first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. They'll I haven't made a change anywhere. Just I usually wait till they kind of announce, and then we go from there. But yeah, so no, I'm excited about that. But the last year as a scouting assistant, so I mean, you're essentially, to put it blunt, you're the absolute bottom of the totem pole. So you got to do everything that anyone wants, essentially. And it really did feel like starting from scratch again, except this time it was the NFL. So I had no issues. I was I'll do whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a big part of it is, we have workouts every week. So our pro scouting staff. So just real quick, the difference between the two staffs are
nothing but time.
Yeah. I mean,
the
GM for listeners or you guys, if you know, so the GM obviously is at the top, and then you have your number 2 assistant GM or VP of player personnel, which for us is Kyle, and our GM's Terry Fontenot. And then below that you have some teams have a director of player personnel. We had a kind of a director of pro personnel, and then or pro scouting, and then a director of college scouting. So that was the college scouting was Anthony Robinson, who's now the assistant GM with the Tennessee Titans. And then our pro scouting director was Ryan Pace, who is the former GM of the Bears. He was there for about 7 years, I think. So they're the two directors. And then below them, you have pro scouts, you have college scouts that are on the road. And then below those guys is essentially it comes back in, and it's the scouting assistants. And the scouting assistants do everything for all those people I just talked about. So plus the coaches as well. They help out with the coaches. But for us, it was a lot of workouts. So every week we'll bring in tryout guys, guys that are just on the street trying to get on a roster, and we'll work it out. It's usually 3 or 4 guys at a time. So a lot of it is airport runs. So going to pick them up from the airport, bringing them in, you take them to the hotel, you put together itineraries, you bring them in for their physicals in the morning, which can sometimes really go on. I've sat in some that have gone for about 6 or 7 hours. So you just sit there and try and fill some time. So but that's you do that every week. During the season, we actually did, myself and the other scouting assistant, we did special teams advances. So one of the things that the pro scouting staff provides to the coaches advance reports. So we had 3 pro scouts, and they were all assigned teams throughout our schedule. And so let's say we're playing the Panthers week 1, which we are this year. We have a scout in our building right now that's assigned the Panthers. So one of his jobs is he basically watches all the tape of that season or last season, obviously for this example. And he puts a write-up a report in for every single player on that roster, including guys on the practice squad that may not even play, just in case they might get called up on game day to play. So we got a report in on every single one of those players. And then he'll watch the tape more from an X's and O's standpoint, and he'll try and pick up tendencies and signals and things that they might use throughout a game that then he'll go and give our coaches, so that on game days our coaches can maybe if they see the coordinator doing a certain signal, they know, okay, that's going to be a blitz, or that's going to be a run play, or that's a pass play, or just anything that kind of gives us an advantage. And so that's one of the services, I guess, that our pro scouts offer the coaches. And so we were actually very fortunate. We did special teams advances for our special teams coordinator. So for me, I didn't know really anything about special teams because it's the least fun part of football to most people. Surprisingly, once you actually get stuck into it, it's actually it's pretty cool. So, but I loved it and I learned a lot. There's obviously a lot of elements. Everyone always asks me about punters just because we got so many in the league. And I never really had an answer for them about what we were looking for or what was good about the punter or anything like that. So, now I kind of do have those answers, at least a little bit. So we did that. That took up a lot of our time, and we helped out with reports, and so that's kind of during the season. Then once the season finishes, we have draft meetings. So our college scouts will come off the road, and we'll get into basically our draft room. And in December, we'll start on our backboard, which is essentially our guys that probably later round guys and undrafted guys. And then we'll kind of jump into it a little more heavy with guys on the front board. So higher priority guys. We'll start talking about post All-Star break. So in our February and April meetings, we'll talk about that. So our job is essentially magnets. We get all the magnets ready for those meetings. We make sure all the printouts and everything like that's ready. And we'll kind of put together books and packets and anything you could think of for all the scouts that are coming in. Obviously for our GM, assistant GM, and all those guys. Then once we go to All-Star games, we go out with them. We'll travel to wherever it is, and we'll kind of put together roster cards so they know who the players are and what numbers they're wearing for those games. Literally anything you can think of. Besides bringing them coffee, they never asked for us. They never asked for us to bring them coffee. So that's the only thing we didn't do was bring them coffee. So, but that's part of the job. And everyone, the nice thing about it is everyone above you has done what you've done. And so it's very much they very much respect what you're going through because they know how difficult some of the stuff is that you're doing, just in terms of managing workload. And then obviously you have no hard feelings about it all because you know that they've gone through the exact same thing as you. So it's very much a kind of a mutual respect. And even our GM, he was a scouting assistant way back. Him and our director of pro scouting were scouting assistants together at the Saints. So they've all been through it. So it's a pretty cool element of it all.
That's awesome. Yeah. How many at your level scouting assistant people do you have?
Not anymore.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. how many people are sort of at that level in the building?
So two. It was me and one other guy.
So you got a huge workload just between the two of you, hey?
Yeah, and it at times it honestly feels a little absurd how much is put on your plate. But you talk to scouts that have done it, and you realize why. It's just because when you're, for the role that I'm about to go into, and for obviously the higher up you get, when you're on the road and you're on your own basically. So our GM and assistant GM basically say, hey, have your reports in by December, whatever. We'll see you in December. It's basically you're left to do it on your own. The ability to kind of like manage time and manage your schedule and your workload, and it's really important, as it is in obviously a lot of jobs. But for us, like the best way to learn how to do that is by just having absolutely everything thrown on you and just seeing how you manage. And we made a ton of mistakes throughout the year. There's no question. But we didn't make the same mistake twice, and that was the main thing. Exactly. Yeah. And so I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I know that my counterpart, he feels the same way. So.
I did at one point think, oh yeah, maybe a team of like 10 to 15 of you, maybe just working through all that.
Sounds like with all the shit you got to do.
Yeah, the fact there was two of you, that's pretty cool. I wanted to touch on quickly. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say that is the dream. Once you get the dream of the NFL, then the new dream becomes just more and more help as a scouting assistant.
Yeah, exactly. So. Climb that ladder. I wanted to touch on quickly. We saw a really awesome video come out of the Cardinals on draft day. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. It was just the process of so that was really cool. Is that pretty similar to what it's like on the day for you guys, I guess? And are you in the war room on draft day as everything's going down?
Yes, it's funny you bring up that video because one of the guys that's pretty prominent in that video, Rob, who's the assistant director of player personnel with the Cardinals, he actually just got that job about 3 or 4 months ago. He was a pro scout for us all last year.
Okay.
So so for us it was pretty cool and kind of funny, honestly, seeing him in that video.
Yeah.
But Rob is like, when you talk about analytical and cerebral and knows what he's talking about, he's pretty special when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, no, it is similar. So our setup, I'm in the draft room, or was in the draft room for the draft this year. And we kind of have the setup. I don't know if you've seen a photo of our draft room, but we have our owner, our GM, Kyle's there. We have head coach there as well, and then Rich McKay, who was our president. So they all sit in kind of like the middle section.
Yep.
And then there's tables that sort of surround behind. We're at the table directly behind, and we got our main board up there, like right in front. We got our backboard to the right. We have our roster just next to our main board, just because as we draft guys, we'll put them up where we're going to put them on the depth chart or where we think they might play.
Mm-hmm.
And then we obviously have a bunch of boards behind us that are essentially the whole draft. So as the draft goes, we take guys off our board and we put them where they got drafted. And so that's kind of the setup. And then as far as people in there, it's really not as many as you might think. I thought it was going to be everybody. But one of the key people we have in there is our analytics guy, and our GM, Terry's very calm. So he's never panicked about anything. But we definitely there was phone calls and trade offers from both ways that were pretty cool to kind of see unravel or not unravel, just to see how offers were thrown out there. And Terry or the other GM or whoever it may be kind of stood firm on what they wanted and
get played.
And again, there's a real respect with how they all communicate with each other. I know you've probably seen the movie Draft Day. It's really not like that where they're
that's a bit of a shame.
At least from my experience. Now, there might be examples of that. So I'm not going to speak for everybody, but at least in my experience, it's very much a mutual understanding. It's no one's kind of screwing anyone over. And so, but our analytics guy, he's big involved in terms of that. He has a lot of calculations that he does based on the value of a trade or what picks we should give up for a certain player, and based on the value of that player using historical data. And he's really good at what he does. So Terry's often over there kind of talking with him, hey, would this work? Would this not work? And then once the decision kind of gets made, he either makes the call or he doesn't make the call, and then we kind of go from there. So, but it is cool. It's really cool watching it on TV, all those years to then finally be in the room.
Enormous.
And then when we make the pick and everyone's in there, and you listen to the first time that kid kind of hears that he's getting drafted is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, for sure. And how far out from draft day did you know that you guys were going to take Bijan, or was it like do they kind of play it close to the chest? Like how well known was that?
They play it pretty close to their chest. I think one of the many benefits, but one of the big benefits of being a scouting assistant is that because we had to create certain documents and certain things for the most part, we, there's probably a a large portion of what we did in that building that only us and sort of 2 or 3 other people might have known. And that's even to this day with smaller things, like when we're cutting a player, it's usually just the GM, the head coach, and us that really know, and maybe 2 or 3 others, just because we're the ones that make the call to bring into the coach's office. And so, but yeah, so we had an idea. We didn't know. I don't think you ever, unless you have the number 1 pick, you have no idea what's going to happen in the draft. So obviously sitting at 8 for us, we didn't know exactly who was going to be there. Bijan could have been taken at 2, and we would have had to pivot and take someone else. So,
yeah, of course.
Who would you have pivoted and taken?
It would have depended who was there. So,
15, yeah.
Exactly.
That meme of Charlie Day on there working out all the
yeah. No, but we had a group of about, I want to say 4 or 5 guys that we were targeting at our position at number 8, and so it was kind of one of those things that if so and so was there, then we take him. If he wasn't, then we take the next guy. If he wasn't, then we take the next. So that's kind of how it worked for us.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, grouse. I want to start before I go into my next question and just say that Kevin Costner in draft days never lied to me ever. So I think that's exactly how it is. And you can't tell me any different. But my next question was about your roles differing from in-season to post-season. But because you're climbing the ladder so quickly and you've never done an in-season and a post-season in the same job, we'll say what you're moving on to your new role now. How is it going to be different? Obviously, you're not the bottom of the ladder now. You're obviously the next rung up. So how's life going to change for you now?
Yeah, so for me, I'll be out on the road now, which is nice. That's was a big draw card for me to want to do college scouting. Is the ability to kind of, you are your own boss when you're on the road as far as scheduling and when you do certain things, and for me that's awesome. I love that kind of freedom. And also you get to go out to different schools and meet different people, be in new environments. And so essentially what that means is that, so in my role, so I'm a BLESTO scout, which is, there's these services called BLESTO and NFS. And these 2 services, not every team subscribes to them, but I would say of the 32 teams, probably 20 odd teams subscribe to them. You have teams like, I think the Texans aren't in it, the Patriots aren't in it, the Rams, I don't think. So there are some teams that aren't. But essentially what it is that it's a sharing service. So back in like the 70s maybe, or I'm not sure exactly when, a group of teams, BLESTO was the original one, a group of teams essentially came together and said, we don't have the resources to be sending our scouts out to every single school in America, and we just don't have that. So how can we kind of share information that's not giving away our secrets, but it's just sharing like general information? So date of birth and, height, weight, speed, things like that aren't helping any team outside of just basic stuff. So they came together, and I think the BLESTO stands for, I think it's Bears, Lions, Eagles, I think Steelers, and then I can't remember what the last 2 are. But they were the original teams that formed it.
Oh, it might have been the Oilers if it was back that long ago or something like that.
Yeah, Houston. But I'm not sure what the T would be, but anyway, yeah. So, but so it's a shared service, and then so NFS came along maybe 20 odd years ago, and it's basically a competing service. But what they do is each team puts a scout in BLESTO. So the Atlanta Falcons subscribe to BLESTO, and so we have a BLESTO scout, and that's now me. So I still scout for the Falcons, but when I go out and I get height, weight, speed, when I get character information on the player, like his personal character, that information gets shared with the other teams that are in BLESTO.
Right.
Now, I also will write reports that during the spring, so we actually just had the meetings about 5 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. We had them down in Florida, where we share reports. You get up on a stage, you read in front of all the teams that are there, and they basically watch some tape while you talk about it. But those reports, a lot of the little nuggets and diamonds that you find, you kind of save for your own team. But the base, like general stuff, is what you kind of share with the rest of the service. And so it's a really what they use it for is like a developmental role essentially. So the next step after this would be a full area scout where you have your own area. You only work for the Falcons. You don't work in BLESTO. And so, but yeah, so that's essentially what I'll be doing. It'll differ because I won't be in the office every day. I'll kind of come into the office when I can. But yeah, no, I'm really excited about the opportunity. It's going to be cool. It's going to be really cool. I think a lot of my relationships are with people that work in college still. And so to kind of be able to catch up with friends and then use that to my advantage to be good at my job is also, a nice added benefit. So.
No, absolutely. We've got a couple of questions to finish off, but before we get there, mate, I just want to really thank you for coming on and giving us your time. And I'm actually sitting here, not that I wasn't sure how it was go, but listening to your story, I reckon I could talk to you for hours about just all the little shit that you got going on. I reckon it's just so fascinating. And to hear, that they had the balls to go over and volunteer your time. You weren't guaranteed anything. You threw yourself into the deep end, like Carts was saying before. And, to be a full circle moment that you didn't want to stand in front of all the players and talk coaching, but now you're standing in front of all the coaches and talking scouting. And and the fact that we're now, I hope we can call you a friend of the show, that you probably, the way you're climbing, you're going to be Australia's first GM over there, because it's just you're climbing the ranks that quickly. It's awesome. So we do appreciate your time and coming on and actually just spilling your guts about this story, mate, because I think it's grouse.
No worries. Like I said, I appreciate you guys having me on.
And shout out to your dad for putting us onto you. Superstar.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
A question actually come from some of the boys that I work with today when I was talking that I was going to come on and speak to you. They want to know, you say you sit in a dark room and you watch all the film, but what are you looking for, or do you get to actually speak to players or anything like that? How do you know that Bijan Robertson is a little bit different to someone else, and that you're the kind of guy that we want in the building? Like, what are you looking for that's a little bit different?
Yeah, so for us, it starts with character. So if they can't fit our locker room, then we don't really care what they can do for us on the field. Some teams are different with that. For us, it's, you might get a couple of good seasons out of them, but we're trying to build a foundation to win multiple Super Bowls. So for us, it's about character. So that's the first thing that all our scouts will do when we go into a building is we speak to the pro liaison, we speak to the strength staff, we find out about the player, and that's during the season. Once you get out of the season is when you actually get more face-to-face interaction with the college players, because you'll have the combine, you'll have their pro days, you'll bring them in for top 30 visits, all that sort of stuff. And so then that's when you sit down with the player and you actually you interview them, but you really try and make it more of an organic sort of conversation and just get a feel for, what do they find funny? Who's closest to them in their life? What's important to them outside of football? If it's family, great. If it's not, then what is it? And just kind of get a feel for who they are and how they're going to be in your building. And obviously you never know until they're in there. But you can make it 99% sure that you do know. So that's big for us. And then obviously comes the ability part, which is the tape part for us. So, I think it always starts with traits. If they don't have any traits, whether they're polished or unpolished as a player, if they don't have any traits, we want someone that is going to get better and better. And that's not to say that they aren't already really good. But if a guy is who they are right now, then, unless they're an absolute freak, unless they're Peyton Manning or Tom Brady in their prime, then usually it's not, you want someone that's going to get better and better. And we feel that way again about Bijan as well. Like, for as good as he was in college, I mean, he is going to getting a lot better, especially how we're going to use him. And so then that's the other piece of it is how do they fit your scheme? Because it's great, using the most basic example, but like a 3-4 defense versus a 4-3 defense. Well, if they're not explosive coming out of a 2-point stance and you're a 3-4 defense and they're an outside linebacker, then what's the point in having them? Like if they can't get off the ball, if they have to be in a 3-point, yeah, you can move them around. You can, but if at their core they don't fit what you do, then for us, then we're not going to take them. And so without you, that was a bit of a challenge for our scouts this year because we got a new defensive coordinator because Dean Pease retired, and our defensive coordinator, he's all about size and mass, and so some of the guys that we've been evaluating as potentially a scheme fit for us, they were more speed rushers off the edge, whereas he wanted more power players. And so we had to kind of just adjust with that. And so that's a really important piece of it all. And then obviously just like how productive they are and in what ways are they productive. And so that's where, Bijan kind of checked the boxes at every stage of that. And I got to say, like, just getting to know him since he's come into our building, he is an awesome human being. Like to be around him is you become like a better person being around him. And if you ask anyone in our building, they'd say the same thing. So we are around him a fair bit. We have to be, otherwise you don't know the type of person that you're getting. So and then for me as a scouting assistant, during the season we travel with the team. We're out at practices. We're filming at practices. So I'm around the team like every day, all day. So yeah, it's pretty cool. First day doing it, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And then after 3 or 4 days, you realize they're just normal people, and it kind of wears off pretty quick. So,
no, beautiful. Before my actual last one, I've got a quick one. How do you go? How do you get received being an Aussie? Because there's probably not too many Aussies in your sort of line. How are you perceived as an Aussie in the scouting field?
Yeah, so when I first came over, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of laughed at a little bit. And so I sort of just kept to myself in terms of my opinions and anything that I wanted to say football wise, and I sort of just tried to take everything in. Because there were a couple of times where I did let my opinion be known on a player or whatever it may be, and I was kind of told, well, you didn't play football, so what do you know? That kind of along those lines. But I think the game of football is developing so much. Obviously, there's a massive push for women in football, which is great. There's a massive push for football internationally, with the London games, the Germany games. So I do think that it's becoming a much more inclusive sport. And I feel like I've got into the NFL at the right time in terms of that, where there is a big movement for not just your traditional scout. And they want, I think one of the things that my bosses liked when I was interviewing was that I kind of had a different perspective, and that I wasn't just born and raised in the same thought process as everybody else. And so I kind of try and use that as my advantage. But there's definitely times, especially where I speak to guys, some of the players that are from Mississippi or like deep South states, and they've never met anyone outside of the South, basically. And so I joke with them, and I tell them, you're not really from the South. I'm from the South.
Yeah.
But it's funny because, sometimes they can't understand me and I can't understand them. But no, it's cool. We kind of have fun along the way, like learning how each other speaks. And so no, it's been fine, honestly.
Nah, that's good to hear. Keep blazing that trail, man. It's awesome. So final one for me. You said earlier you were living pretty short-term goals. Are you starting to project a bit further, set some long-term goals? And what do you sort of think the next 5 years looks like for you?
Yeah, I've learned, initially when I came in, definitely wanted to, be a GM and all of that. And that's still somewhat at the back of my mind. But I think that you really can't with how things change in football and just the amount of work that you've got to do, and you really can't look that far ahead. So I've that's still in the back of my mind. It's definitely a goal of mine. But for me, I think the next 5 years would be obviously after this year as a BLESTO scout, hopefully move up to an area. And then, within area scouting, there's kind of a hierarchy of prestige of what areas you have. Obviously, if you have the Southeast,
of course,
the SEC schools, that's considered a much bigger deal than some of the other areas. And so it'd be kind of just working my way up there. And then you never know what can happen from there. So obviously, the goal one day would be to be a GM, and but that's that's a long way down the road. So for now, I really am just looking kind of every day.
No, beautiful, awesome, mate. Well, good luck with it. Hey, we're GM all the way.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to. I cannot wait to. You've obviously you've thrown out the news before Atlanta has that you've got the promotion. So I can't wait till you get the promotion to GM, and I'll probably fly over to interview you personally as being the first Australian podcast to get you on there. Carts, I'll bring you too. It'll probably be a teary moment. So that'll be. And
I'll give you guys a front row seat to the press conference.
Yeah.
That was my next thing. I want to make sure. I'm pretty sure the GM would have a suite at most games too. I don't think I'm ever going to get in a GM suite for a game. So maybe we can swindle that one as well. That'll be awesome.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, well, when you're the big wig, I'm sure you can do plenty.
Just mark it down, 23rd of June, just remember.
Yeah, 2023, exactly right.
Yeah.
No, mate, we to sit here for over an hour now with you is been incredible, especially on your holiday. Go enjoy the Ashes. We have to give a shout out to the London Wi-Fi for holding up for that long, which has been pretty awesome. So that we're definitely going to keep in touch, mate, because I love your story, and I'm going to be watching the Falcons going, you know what, that's James's man. He's just rushed off the edge. That's James's boy. It's grouse. So we appreciate your time and look forward to everything that is coming your way, mate.
Yeah, thanks so much again.
I appreciate
mate.
that, guys.
Yeah. Enjoy London. Go the Aussies.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll send through some nice pictures for you at the Lords. So,
oh, absolutely,
yes, beautiful.
Grouse.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, guys.
Legend. Thanks, mate.
You too. All the best.